It's time for Talk With on 1430 WNAV, an opportunity to speak with various government, political, and community leaders about the issues that affect you. Each week, we interview the newsmakers in Anne Arundel County, Queen Anne's County, and our state leaders. Now, here's the host of Talk With, WNAV News Director Barbara Cox.
Good afternoon. Kenneth Burns in for Barbara Cox on this edition of Talk With. And this Monday, we're talking with Kim Burns with the Maryland Business for Responsive Government. She's the president of the organization. Kim, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a lot of issues, and we're a week away from a hearing that the Senate Budget and Tax hearing is going to hold in regards to the upcoming special session. Definitely, they're going to talk about redistricting, but as far as you're concerned, the most bandied about topic over the past month is tax hikes, and MBRG is not really a fan of tax hikes at this point.
No, MBRG is a fan of spending cuts, and we are looking forward to the hearing on the 26th and think, at least from all accounts, it's designed to educate the members of the Budget and Tax Committee about various business interests in the state and how they're developing, so that the members will have the opportunity to understand a little more, I guess, than when they did something like the computer services tax a few years ago that was done sort of under cloak of hurry, hurry, rush, rush. This one is designed to be, I think, a little more paced. And an educated legislator is a good legislator. So from that perspective, I'm anxious to hear what business and industry will say.
Let's talk about 2007, because that was the last special session, and that was solely devoted to how to fix the structural deficit, and they came out with a series of taxes. You mentioned computer services, there was real estate services, bringing back the snacks tax. They ultimately brought in the Millionaires Club, and according to one news report from a year or two ago, it was actually in the Washington Examiner, a number of people, particularly in Montgomery and Harford counties, did not like the Millionaires Club in particular. Well,
Montgomery County, at least according to the Montgomery County executive, saw a huge flight of millionaires, more so than Harford County, from the state of Maryland. A disproportionate number, I would assume, live in Montgomery County, and when the state did that, they simply spent another month in Florida or moved altogether and affected their residency, and the state of Maryland or the county of Montgomery ended up being the big loser. And whether or not that was the risk was worth the reward, I doubt. I mean, the legislature had the opportunity to reenact that this year and declined to do that. And there are a lot of drawbacks to it, and I frankly think the jurisdiction felt the pain and consequence of what they did.
I think interesting, looking at the legislature this year, it seems that they didn't have enough of a stomach to even bring up a tax. I mean, they were also talking about gas taxes as well, but they didn't bring those to a final vote.
Yeah, I think, Kenny, the gas tax will probably, although not likely, see in the special session to emerge. I think the governor is backing off of that as a matter of the special session. He may reserve it for the regular session that starts in January. But they did do an alcohol tax increase, and I'm sure your listeners have read about some of the problems inherent in that. That is an issue that we cover in our publication called Roll Call that rates the legislators, not because it was an alcohol tax increase, but because of the fact the increase was done by sort of going outside of the uniformity of the sales tax. So it's not taxed at a sales tax rate, it's taxed at a higher rate. And that creates all kinds of problems in terms of tax policy. If business people like anything, they like certainty and stability, and I think the whole philosophical shift that the Maryland General Assembly evidenced by doing that is they put in place a slippery slope that even they're having a tough time defining.
I think it's interesting that you brought that up, because when Comptroller Peter Franchel was issuing his final numbers for violations that his office had caught, he mentioned that he thought it was the most cumbersome tax that they could implement, and that a lot of businesses were still trying to figure it out.
Indeed, as is he. I mean, you've got a lot of problems, and some of the co-sponsors of the bill are trying to figure it out, too. I mean, that's what happens. We saw the same thing in 2007 with the computer services tax when they passed it, after they considered landscapers and they spoke up, and after they considered real estate people and they spoke up, they went to computer services. And then when they had to define it, they had all these unintended consequences, and it ended up being repealed.
In fact, I remember once word started to get out, technology at that time. And I don't think Twitter was as big as it was at that point, but definitely the blogs took hold, and they had a whole web-based lobbying group against that tax.
It was the birth of a lobbying industry in Annapolis, no doubt. They'll make sure that doesn't happen again, I'll tell you that.
Now, Claire Louder, she's president of the West County Chamber, and one thing that she is urging all businesses, whether they're members of the chamber or not, she's urging them to lobby their legislators now and tell them wait till January, at least give us enough time to really check the impact of the tax hikes that are being proposed.
That's exactly right. The last time the legislature did this in 2007, you'll remember they just had a vast array of taxes that they could propose on services, haircuts, everything, and they lumped them all together in one afternoon's worth of hearings, even though the special session ran 2 weeks. They dealt with it in one day. I mean, you get out of it what you put into it, and if you have a one-day hearing, you're going to get, not very well planned out public policy, as evidenced by the computer services tax.
Speaking of haircut, I'm probably due for one this week. I should ask my barber how would he be able to implement a sales tax.
So buy the hair.
We're speaking with Kim Burns, president of Maryland Business for Responsive Government. They are a bipartisan group that lobbies the state leaders here in Naptown to come up with some more business-friendly policies. And you mentioned roll call. We're going to get into that next as we continue on your hometown station, 1430 WNAV and 1430WNAV.com.
Catch the Bowie Bay Sox for great baseball and family fun all summer long. Get in the game this week as the Bay Sox host a meet and greet autograph session with former Virginia Tech quarterback and Baltimore Ravens draft choice Tyrod Taylor this Thursday night. This Friday night is Bowie's largest pillow fight. Bring your pillow for some post-game madness. This Saturday night, join us for Margaritaville night and a post-game Jimmy Buffett-themed fireworks spectacular. Bowie Bay Sox tickets start at just $6 and parking is free. Go to baysox.com for tickets and information. Bowie Bay Sox baseball will knock your socks off.
They say you're nothing special, that I should look around. But I say you're the greatest friend that I've ever found.
They say a dog is man's best friend, but who takes you to the hardware store? Your car. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer, or you'd rather leave it to the pros, there's a Parts Plus Auto Store or Car Care Center near you.
You never let me down, I'll take good care of you.
Hey, for all the reasons you love your car, there's Parts Plus Auto Stores and Parts Plus Car Care Centers.
Hi, this is Bill Lesby from Good Morning Annapolis. Join us each day and get things started. You'll get national and international news from CBS, plus the latest local news and sports from the WNAV newsroom. Traffic Scan 1430 is there to ease your commute, plus listen to informative interviews on various topics of local interest. Hey, let's not forget the Weatherbug forecast, bird bites, and the birthday club. Information you need, music you know. Good Morning Annapolis, weekdays 6 until 10 on your hometown station, 1430 WNAV.
You're listening to your hometown station, 1430 WNAV, now in the city at 99.9 FM. We're talking with Kim Burns, president of Maryland Business for Responsive Government. A week before the Senate Budget and Tax Committee starts taking a look at what a lot of the business community is hoping that they will wait till January to address the possible tax hikes as they address how to, or as they possibly consider how to address the structural deficit. Kim, your group came out with roll call for this year, and for the most part, if you're looking at it in the grand scheme of things politically, a lot of the scores were along party lines. The Republicans did well as far as being business friendly. The Democrats not so much. In fact, a lot of them dropped, especially in the House, even to single digits.
That's right. That's right. Well, for your readers who might not be familiar with roll call, this is its 26th consecutive year of publication, and over those 26 years, what we do is try to identify issues that are fundamental to business and jobs in Maryland, and they really are some fundamental issues in there, and we choose them, or our State Advisory Council, which is made up of about 20 people who are familiar with the operations of the 90-day session from various business angles and interests, really choose them regardless of party, regardless of vote, we look at the issues on their merits first and foremost, and how important are these issues to creating a healthy business climate and jobs in the state of Maryland. And then we go back and look at what point in the process provides the most accurate measure of where a legislator stands. And frankly, Kenny, I don't know these scores, and I'd venture to say nobody on the State Advisory Council does until after the issue's been chosen, until after the best point in the process has been. So, you gotta have that grasp of those fundamental issues before you can go to the next step.
And I'm just looking at the county breakdown for Anne Arundel County. For the most part, the lowest scoring senator that represents Anne Arundel County would be Senator Jim Rosapep. He went from 38% in 2010 to 11% this year. And then when you compare it to the other 4 districts, the lowest scoring senator after that is Senator Astle, who represents the Annapolis area, 73%, and then they pretty much go up from there.
Anne Arundel County their senators did extremely well by our measure, regardless of their party, Democrat or Republican. And as a resident of the county, I'm very proud of that. I think it's a very balanced, solid approach for the most part, more so than you see in some of the other jurisdictions. But I think earlier in the program you alluded to Claire Lauder at the West County Chamber, and I think her message is right on the money. I mean, I think what this shows you, some of these low marks in some of these lower jurisdictions, is that business has a lot of work to do. And whether the legislature considers tax increases in November or January doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. It actually gives businesses more time to reach out and educate some of these legislators on these fundamental issues that are in here, as well as tax policy, which is where you ought to be going, because looking at these scores, they just don't understand it. And if this publication, which you can find on mbrg.org, tells you anything, it's that every business person should reach out to their legislators and talk to them about the impact of these taxes on their business today, because whether it comes in November or January is of very, very, very little consequence.
Now, the interesting thing, we were talking off the air, 3 jurisdictions, Baltimore City, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, also happen to be the 3 jurisdictions that could pretty much outvote the rest of the state, including Anne Arundel and Queen Anne's counties. And they're also among the lowest scores on the roll call report.
Yep, two of the zeros in the House of Delegates came out of the Baltimore metropolitan area. But, you have to ask, we have a legislature in Maryland where their number one job of the part-time legislature is full-time legislator. So that's what these people do all the time, nothing else. So you really have to ask, how much business expertise and experience do they bring to the legislature? And the answer, given their profession, full-time legislator, is not as much as I think the regular business person does. And so I think it's really incumbent, especially if you do business in one of those jurisdictions, or whatever the situation is, that you reach out to these guys and educate them now. Obviously, I think that there's a little dialogue that's missing.
So as far as the issues that was looked at, for our listeners, what was looked at in particular in regards to scoring the legislators this year?
These are really jobs. These are really bills that are fundamental to Maryland business and creating jobs. We identify some of those as the alcohol tax, which we talked about a little bit earlier, subjecting to sunset review a wide range of tax credits, including all of the state's business taxes, which is a bill, or business tax credits, which is a bill that came up before the legislature. That was defeated. Increasing the number of businesses that are eligible to pay their state, county, and municipal property taxes on a semi-annual basis, which was approved, taking some of the burden off of businesses who didn't have that flexibility before, which was a victory, frankly, for the business community. A lot of it has to do with workforce conditions and some of those. There's about probably 30 different bills we look at, we finally grade the legislators on.
We're talking with Kim Burns, president of Maryland Business for Responsive Government. Next week, the Senate Budget and Tax Committee will be holding a hearing to learn about what the business community is feeling about what they could possibly do in the upcoming special session. And as mentioned earlier, I'm sure, Kim, you would sign along with Ms. Louder. Please wait till January so we have enough time to examine these issues.
Absolutely. Let's have a full debate and discussion on these and, not do it under cloak of a special session.
We'll wrap things up right here on your hometown station, 1430 WNAV, right after this.
If you want the very best sales, service, and accessories for your RV, then you want Leo's Vacation Center in Gambrills. Here's what one customer has to say about Leo's.
We bought a 1985 Prowler and the bunkhouse, and we had it for a few years and loved it and had a great time, and their service was excellent.
So, what are you going to do when you need a new RV, trailer, or service? That's right, call Leo's. 1-800-559-4793.
This is TV news anchor Ernie Anastas.
And I'm Father John Couture.
Father, why do people feel so restless?
It's the human condition. St. Augustine said, our hearts are restless until they rest in thee, O Lord. And just as the bird needs its nest, the human soul needs its rest in God. We all yearn for more than this world can give. For more, visit my website, messengerofjoy.com. I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye for now. Thank you, and God bless you.
If you miss the great musical sounds of the 50s and 60s, then you gotta catch The Time Machine with Charlie Stinchcomb. Saturday afternoons at 3 on WNAV. Rare doo-wops, rhythm and blues, plus great group harmony. Highlighted by interviews with some of the talented entertainers who made that music happen. Also, your requests awaken memories for many and introduce new listeners to that classic era. It's the only show of its kind on Annapolis radio, The Time Machine. Saturday afternoons at 3 on your hometown station, 1430 WNAV.
Closing moments on your hometown station, 1430 WNAV, as we talk with Kim Burns, president of Maryland Business for Responsive Government. Now, one thing I did want to point out from this year's roll call, Senator DeGrange from Anne Arundel County achieved the highest MBRG cumulative score among all Democrats who served in the Senate for at least 4 years. Kim, we already know the business community is not really wanting a tax increase because of economic conditions and other factors contributing to the current economic condition. So the next question I have is, what should the legislators ultimately consider, whether it's in October or in January 2012, in regards to making a more business-friendly climate in Maryland?
Well, I think there are two components to that answer. Number one is you have to look at our competitive posture right next to Virginia. And Virginia is a huge competitor of the state of Maryland. I think it was CNBC that just released a study that ranked Virginia number one in terms of business climate and ranked the state of Maryland 44th. So, you have a governor there who has held the line on tax increases for business, who has who's very committed to Virginia as a right-to-work state, and who is very committed to reducing litigation as it relates to its burden, particularly on business, and creating and fostering growth. And that's a pretty favorable business climate and a formidable candidate to have next door. So I think that Maryland is well advised to take a look at maybe some of the things that Virginia is doing. What else can Maryland do? I think that Maryland needs to, it needs to hear from the business community. It needs to work in partnership with the business community, and it can't really do that in a vacuum. The business community needs to speak up and partner with them too. And I'm not talking about these new kind of Maryland industries. I'm not talking about cybersecurity. I'm not talking about technology, telecommunications. I'm talking about some of the real stalwarts in Maryland's industry, our retailing community, our hospitality services community, our hotel, motel, some of the real fundamentals to the Maryland economy.
It does seem that Governor O'Malley and his administration are doing a big jump on bringing the what they would call the new economy industries to Maryland.
Absolutely. But you can't ignore the old ones either. I mean, that's sort of where Maryland is invested. And while the leadership and the vision certainly is there for cybersecurity and some of those new Maryland economies, you also have the construction industry. It's kind of dying on the vine, and other industries in the state that you really need to pay attention to.
And as you know, recently a new law went into effect, particularly for state employees, but it kind of gives a kind of window into Governor O'Malley's philosophy of being a pro-union politician, particularly with the law to have non-union members pay fees to the state's largest union, and then, of course, his push for wind energy involving the steel workers.
That's a whole nother show, it sounds like. The union legislation this year, they passed a bill to require that home health care workers also pay into a union. And MBRG, that was one of the issues that we rated the legislators on. Just as a matter of business climate, don't think that it's a very fair policy to force people to pay into unions for a lot of the reasons that the Sun papers talked about, as a matter of individual choice, to pay in, to force people to pay into these unions. Just not good business policy.
And of course, you and I could go on and on about all of this, but unfortunately we are out of time for this edition of Talk With. Kim Burns is president of Maryland Business for Responsive Government. Kim, thank you for coming down to Radio Park.
Thank you, and I hope your listeners will check www.mbrg.org for our roll call.
Absolutely, and we thank our listeners for listening to Talk With. I'm Kenneth Burns for Barbara Cox and the entire WNAV radio news team. We hope you join us next week for another discussion with a local leader.
You've been listening to Talk With on 1430 WNAV, a weekly program focusing on various government, political, and community leaders, speaking about the issues that affect you. Join us again next Monday afternoon at 2 for Talk With on your hometown station, 1430 WNAV.